It's the highest peak in the area. And it's known as the Whiskey Mountain because there are about 7 or 8 distilleries dotted around the base of Benrinnes, and they're all getting their water from water supplies or from springs on the mountain into the distillery. The water comes from the hill down a stream into a reservoir, and there's a pipe that feeds the distillery, and this is the overflow from the reservoir. Water is a problem. It has been a problem throughout the history of the distillery, and this year particularly. Every year we stop production in summer, sort of July or August. It's a planned shutdown, and that's when we do maintenance and upgrades and that sort of thing. It's when the workers want to take a holiday. But it's also when the water's most likely to run out. And this year we've had from sort of May onwards. It's just been beautiful weather day after day and very little rain. So we were due to resume production on Wednesday of the past week, and there just wasn't enough water. We need about 1 million litres of water every day going through the distillery. Most of that just gets used for cooling, so 98% of the water just comes out the other side, having been used for cooling purposes, and 2% of it we keep. But if we don't have enough water, we can't cool things down enough, and it slows the process right down. So we've just had to hold off on restarting production, and there's no rain forecast for the foreseeable future, so I don't know when we're going to be back in operation. Peat on top of the granite, and the water sort of trickles down through the peat, picks up traces of peat, and it gives the water a peaty flavour. Quite subtle, but it's there, and it affects the flavour of it. Have you been?
We went to Auckland.
Yep.
It's down in
So this is malted barley. It's barley that's been through the malting process. So the barley will be harvested at the end of summer or beginning of autumn. And just as we drove in here, it's taken up this lift into these silos, and we can store up to 330 tonnes on site. Thanks. So this is the mill. It's a Swiss-made brewer mill. It was put in the 1970s. It's around about 45 years old. When it's running, it makes a lot of noise. You see the malt dropping past that window, and it goes through a series of rollers. That grinds the malt into grist so that the sugar can be extracted. It'll process up to 8 tonnes per hour, but because it's 45 years old, we tend to run a little bit slower than that. So that's grist there. That's what comes out of the mill. As we're milling, we'll be taking samples of grist. We put it through a box like this. It's just for analysis purposes. We need to make sure that the ratio between the different parts of the grist is correct. So most of the grist is this sort of gritty stuff here. That's where most of the sugar is. But in the mixture, you also need the husk, the shell on the outside of the grain. And when that's mixed in with the other parts, it all goes into the mash tun, mixed in together. I'll show you the mash tun next. But you need the husk in there because that allows the water to sort of mix in and flow through. And you need the flour as well, the very finely ground part of the grist. And and the flour stops the water from flowing through too quickly. So the ratio between these three parts is quite critical. It needs to be about 75% gritty sugars, 15% husk, and 10% flour by weight. So as we're milling, we're taking samples, putting them through a box like this, and weighing each component. And if that ratio is wrong, we can adjust the mill to suit. And any little stones that have been picked up in harvest or in transport, they get pushed out the back. So if they went through the mill, they could damage the rollers. But also it's a very dusty environment in the mill. And with all that dust in the air, a stone going through the rollers could cause a spark, and that dust could cause a family.
So it's not
It's the only distillery they own, and they live here on site. It's 5th and 6th generation.
I heard that many of the big distilleries has been sold out to Japanese and Americans. And
Yeah. Mostly part of one big conglomerate or another. We've determined that that's not going to happen here.
Do you still have a mandate to distribute to the world? And, yeah, that's very good.
Great.
It's huge.
Yeah. So this is the mash tun. It's used to extract the sugar from the grist, and it works essentially like an enormous teapot. So the grist is fed in through that funnel, and as it's fed in, it's mixed with hot water, and it fills this tank sort of up to about that height, and with a sort of a hot, watery, porridgey slurry. And if you look inside, there's a whole lot of plates on the floor. They're all kind of locked together, and that's actually a filter that covers the whole floor. It's about that far above the floor. So you've got the water and the grist and the mash tun. We'll then open a valve, and all that sugary water flows down through the filter, through a cooler, and then into two of these fermentation tanks here. Then we'll fill it up halfway again with slightly hotter water. That dissolves some more sugars, and that water flows down through the filter, through the cooler, and into the same two tanks. So much like a teapot, where you've got tea leaves in a teapot and boiling water, pour off a couple of cups of tea, and then put more boiling water in with the same tea leaves, pour off another couple of cups. So same principle on a much larger scale. We'll actually fill it with water a third time, and each time the water is hotter than it was previously. But that last lot of water, that picks up any last remaining sugars. But that water goes back into the holding tanks, or the heating tanks, where it came from. And that gets used as the first lot of water for the next batch of grist. So it's extracting all the sugar we possibly can.
How long does it take to do one batch?
One batch, well, from the point at which the grist is being fed in, after those three waters have gone through, what's left behind in there is called draff. That's the spent grains, and 4 holes open in the bottom of the mash tun, and there's a big rake in there that turns around and pushes the draff out the bottom.
Yeah.
So from the point at which the grist is being fed in to the point at which the draff has been scraped out, that's 11 hours. We'll do that 8 times a week.
Where is Tasker?
Isle of Skye. It's a drive.
Yeah, of course,
Yeah.
of course, yeah. I thought, is that here?
No.
Oh, exactly.
Wow.
So these tanks are called washbacks. That's where the fermentation happens. And we'll fill 2 washbacks at once with that sugary water from the mash tun. It's called wort. It comes up to the point where the colour changes. So each one's 41,500 litres. And as the tank's being filled, the liquid yeast is being added. And then we'll shut the lid and leave it to ferment. It'll usually ferment for around 100 hours. And as it ferments, it'll bubble up to about this height here. And if it gets to that height, that blade turns on and spins around to cut the bubbles down to stop it from overflowing and making a mix. And then the bubbles will slowly settle back down again. And once it's finished fermenting, there'll be somewhere between 7 and 10% alcohol. So the yeast has converted the sugar into alcohol. And that, we call it wash at that point, but really it's beer. It's the same ingredients as beer without the hops. And it's the same process as beer.
Is it tasty?
It's not that nice. I have tried it. And you could drink it. You could get drunk on it, but it would have a regrettable effect on your gastric system.
So usually I see that they're made out of this Oregon pine wood.
Yeah.
Is there any difference?
Some distilleries will use wooden washbacks, some will use stainless steel like these. There is an old argument as to whether wood or stainless steel makes a difference to the whisky. The general thinking seems to be that it probably doesn't make a difference. Well, that's what we'll tell you anyway, because we've got a stainless steel.
Exactly.
I
I figure if it can be an argument about different techniques, there will be.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah. The wooden ones are more beautiful, but they don't last as long and they're harder to clean. So you could say the stainless steel ones are a lazy option. They work pretty well for us. The argument for the wooden ones, you don't actually get any flavour from the wood itself because the liquid doesn't spend that long here and it's just being cycled through over and over again. But I was talking to a guy who runs a craft brewery visit a few weeks ago, and he was saying that, what you make here is beer, and essentially to make whiskey you make beer and then distill it and mature it. It is beer, but all the rules are flipped on their head, because for beer everything has to be super clean, because it ferments for longer and there's a chance that bacteria can get in and you get something a bit nasty. Whereas with whiskey, you want what he was calling the microfloras.
Mm-hmm.
You want them sort of in with the mixture, and they will add their own flavour. So the esters and phenols and things come from the microfloras. So you see this sort of coating around the side. That's called beer stone. It's just kind of a calcium build-up that builds up over time, and it's a bit flaky. And you say in behind those flakes there'll be sort of microfloras and things that will breed and add to the characteristics of the whiskey. And so I was thinking with the wooden washbacks, a bit harder to clean, more sort of crevices and cracks and things where those microflora could be harder. So I'm not a scientist, so I don't know the ins and outs of it, but I thought it was an interesting argument to be honest. Standing under the mash tun, you can see those four angled columns. The draft, the spent grains, comes down those columns into that channel, and there's a big screw in there that turns around, and that pushes the draft out into a bin for collection. And the wort, the sugary liquid, comes through these pipes, through that blue and red box in the corner. That's a heat exchanger. That cools the liquid down to 18 degrees, and that's the right temperature for adding the yeast. And from there it's pumped up into the wash bags. Come through to the still house.
Beauties.
Yeah, they've all just been stripped down and refinished, which is why they're all this sort of uniform pink colour.
Yeah, they're like also like clear. They're not that dark.
So we're hoping that when they get used a few times, heated up, they'll darken a bit because
Still darken,
they
yeah.
look a bit kind of unnatural.
Yes.
So in the still house, we take that beer and we remove all the yeast solids and a lot of the water, and we're left with a clear, highly alcoholic spirit. And the process for that is distillation. So you can see there are 6 stills in here, and the liquid is distilled twice, so there are 2 different sorts of still. This one is a wash still. There are three wash stills. This one over there, that one there, they're the bigger ones. And the smaller ones next to them, that's a spirit still. It's used for the second distillation. So the wash, the beer, comes through that pipe at the end of the room into a tank next door, and from there it goes into one of the wash things. And it comes up to just above the light part of the still. And each of the stills has got a gas fire. So the gas fire will be switched on, and as the wash starts to heat up, the alcohol and some of the water starts to evaporate, and that vapour goes up the still, over the bend at the top, outside to a condenser, which condenses the vapour back into a liquid, and that liquid comes into here. This is the spirit safe. This is used to control the distillation process. So from the first distillation, it comes through either of these pipes here. So that pipe there is the still just here, and that pipe there is the one down the end. And the liquid that comes through here is called low wines. It's around about 20 to 25% alcohol. So it's not yet strong enough to be whiskey. So it comes out the pipe, goes into the bowl, down another pipe, into another tank next door, and then it goes into one of the smaller stills, the spirit stills, and the process starts again. So fire's turned on underneath, vapor goes up, You can actually do it without coming in contact with the liquid. It's called a spirit safe. It's always kept locked. And originally, the systems had a key. Steel and acts as a catalyst. And there's sulfur in the liquid. And the copper neutralizes the sulfur. The sulfur will leave it out as a flame. So you want as much contact with the liquid as possible. Some distilleries have got raw copper stills and they have to be polished all the time. Well, really, why would you? Yeah. From the first distillation, the low wines comes into this tank, and also the heads and the tails from the second distillation. It's all mixed together, goes back for redistilling, and the pot ale goes into this tank here, and it's from here. Here this morning, I came and opened up the distillery, and there was a crow or something in the still house. So I opened the windows and chased it out, and there was a pigeon in here. I don't know where they got in. And Farclas is green grass. So standing here, you can kind of see the valley of the green grass. And just down in front of us, this is the wastewater treatment. So all the wastewater from the distillery goes down into those two ponds. And the casks of whiskey will be taken down to that building, emptied into a tank, and then a tanker truck will take it to Edinburgh for bottling. We don't do any bottling on site. Those pale buildings down there, that's 4 new warehouses that we built at the end of last year. So we've now got 38 warehouses and there's 70-something thousand casks of whiskey. They've all got earth floors and sort of thick stone walls, and there's such a huge amount of liquid in the warehouses that the temperature does fluctuate a little bit, but it tends to remain relatively constant throughout the year. We'll kind of look at all this.
So I think I've read that here it's one of the lowest angel shares.
Yeah, I've read that too. Around about 1.5%.
Yeah.
Yeah. Part of that will be because we've got almost all our warehouses are traditional dunnage warehouses, whereas if you've got a more modern style of warehouse where everything's on pallets and stacked high, you get a greater angel's share, more evaporation, more leakage. So the draft, the spent grains, ends up in those square bins, and the truck will back in, the draft drops into the truck and taken off to be used as animal food. And you can see the pipes where the draft feeds into the bin. Those pipes on the inside are the same size as a football. So to clean the pipes out, the production guys take an actual book, put it into the pipe, and then blow it through with water and compressed air. Cleans it up perfectly. Very simple, effective engineering solution.
It's what you know.
Yeah. That's one of the original farm buildings. Used to have an old water-powered mill in it, but it's just used for storage now. And this was the farm manager's cottage right up until the 1960s. And that granite block thing on the end is an old cheese press. So there were cows on the farm and feeding on the draft and the milk used for the cheese there. These are some of our warehouses. They go quite a long way back that way and down the hill as well. But this road was built in the 1880s, and other than electric lights, it's pretty much as it was when it was built. We used to fill the casks at the end of the tracks and then roll them up into the warehouses. But now we fill in that building there, but this still gets used sometimes. So come on in.
Cold here, huh?
I'm not sure why the lights are very bright in here at the moment. So, yeah, as I was saying before, this is a dunnage warehouse. Both floors under the stones, and a fairly low roof, thick stone walls, and it's always relatively cool in here. And with the earth floor, it's a bit damp as well, so the casks don't dry out and crack. And the casks that we use are almost entirely ex-Oloroso sherry casks from Jerez in Spain. So that they would have had sherry in them for a few years before we get them.
Do you only use sherry?
Yeah.
Alright, no bourbon.
No.
Alright.
And when they arrive, we get 13 truckloads of sherry casks every year. And when they arrive, we fill them with our spirit and put them in the warehouse.
Steal your mum's.